Hello, welcome to Wonder Mom's Workshop. Today we are going to be doing pie crust. Now I confess I am actually really not good at pie crust. However, I have acquired some very helpful tools that have made it manageable for me. So if you're in the same boat as me and want to get better at making pie crust, then maybe I can have something to help you out here today. My mom is like an expert at pie crust and she makes it look easy and I could just never quite master it. So I've got my bowl ready, and whatever pastry recipe you use is totally up to you. Mine is just a basic 2 cups of flour, 1 cup of shortening, and 1/4 cup of water. So I've got my flour and my shortening in here, and of course the first thing we need is a pastry blender. If you don't have a pastry blender, you can of course use a fork or something else to really cut the shortening into the flour. Now, if you are going to get a pastry blender, I would recommend, there's a couple of different kinds. This one is sort of a wire, it's rounded, and this one, if you can see, has a bit more thickness to it, and this really cuts in. So I would recommend not getting the wire one because, as you can see, mine is bent to kingdom come and it just doesn't really do its job very well anymore. So I definitely prefer this one with the flatter rungs to really cut in that shortening. And of course you can use this anytime you cut butter into a flour mixture. So we actually, growing up, would call this a chick chick because of the sound that it would make in the bowl. Just a chick 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 chick. So I'm gonna just cut this through and then add the water to it. Now this is not the part of making a pastry or a pie crust that is difficult for me. It's the rolling out part. So I'll bring you back when I have this all blended together and ready to roll out. All right, so I've mixed up my pie crust and I'm ready to go. Now I'm going to make a peach pie, so I'll have a crust on the bottom and a crust on the top. So I'm gonna teach you 2 different methods that I use to get my dough to do what it's supposed to do. Now, when I first started making pies, it would make me so irritated because I would try to do like my mom did and fold it up, and you fold it in half and then in a quarter, and then I tried to unfold it, and I could never quite get it right, and it always ended up cracking or breaking or just not working, and it would be so totally aggravating. Or I couldn't ever get the right consistency of pie crust, and then it would end up with too much flour. It would be more dry and brittle. And anyway, I could just never find the right balance. So one year, my husband got me this amazing pastry mat. I'm going to highly recommend it. It's a silicone pastry mat, and it's made in France. It's called a roll pat, okay? It's mirror image, but see that? Roll pat. And it's silicone, it's super flexible. It's supposed to be non-stick, and for the most part it is. So when it comes to rolling things out, I really don't even have to use a whole lot of flour. But this pastry mat has seriously saved my bacon. So for pie crust, I do flour it very, very slightly. And I just want to just rub it in to a light dusting. Now I've cut my pie crust in half, so we'll do the first one. The other tool that I like to use is my non-stick rolling pin. What I love about this is that it is weighted. It's super duper heavy, it's very smooth, and again, I do end up adding a little bit of flour to it occasionally. Just, the flour doesn't necessarily stick, but it just kind of keeps it going nice and smooth. Okay, so I'm gonna roll out my pastry, my pie crust, and now my pie crust is a little bit wet, probably a little bit more wet than it needs to be. So I'm gonna add a little bit of flour as I go. And if I add that to the crust, I don't necessarily need to add it so much to my rolling pin. So I'm rolling it out, almost there, trying to keep it nice and round. All right, when I have it about the right size, I'm actually not even going to try to fold it up. Okay, I'm going to take my pie tin. I'm going to use a stone one today. I also love using my glass pie tins, but aluminum, metal, whatever you have is going to work just fine. So what I'm actually going to do with this, and the brim of my pie tin is a little bit bigger than I expected it to be, so I'm going to roll this out just a little bit more. Now the bigger it gets, the thinner the crust gets, right? The harder it gets to manage. So, but I've got this rolled, and I'm just going to put my pie tin face down and centered on my pastry. Do you see that? From here, I'm actually going to lift up the corner of the pastry mat and reach under and get my hand under the center of that pie tin. And then I'm gonna gently hold it all together and just flip the whole thing over, okay? This is where I get really excited. Then I'm going to just gently peel off, and this silicone pastry mat is really super flexible, and it just comes right off. I'm just gonna peel it right off the crust. Gravity basically does most of the job in getting it off of the pastry mat. Now, I don't want to use too much flour on my pastry mat when I do use it because, of course, at this point it would dump all over the counter. All right, but then I gently just kind of lift up the edges and let gravity do its work, and I let it sink into the pie tin, okay? And there's no cracking. It's all centered where it needs to be. It's brilliant. So that is method number one. I'm going to fill up my pie and then roll out the second crust to show you a different way to put the top on. Because obviously once the pie is filled, we can't do that same method for the crust on the top. So I'll come back and show you that in just a minute. All right, so I've got my filling in my pie, and just side note, my filling, I actually, when harvest time comes and when I'm canning my peaches and apples, I will set some aside where I will just cut them up, mix them with some cinnamon sugar, and freeze them, raw pack. So as I do that and then I freeze them, when they come out, especially like my apples, they end up softening up really easily. I mean, they thaw softened, and so my apple pie filling is already made. It is a bit moist, but I just dump it in the pie and it's like already ready. Okay, so that's what I did for this case with my peach. It was already prepared, so I just thawed it and dumped it in. Now we need to take care of the crust on the top. I've rolled out my dough, and from here, again, using this silicone pastry mat, we're actually gonna fold it in half. Now my mom used to take it and just, she could use her hands. She had like magic hands and she could fold it over without making it break. And I don't do well at that. So I use my mat and I actually fold it in half with my mat, just like that. And I pull, gently pull, peel that pastry mat off. Okay, and I wanna make sure that the top of my pie crust is floured really well so that when it folds, it's not gonna stick to itself. Okay, so right now my pastry is in half. Now I wanna fold it in half again just so that it's easier to handle. Okay, so again, I fold it in half and peel back the pastry mat. Okay, just making sure that nothing stays behind. A little bit there, but not bad. And now at this point, it's a lot easier for me to handle this. Okay, and here it's just a matter of me lifting up the pastry, placing it on the top of my pie, making sure that that point is in the center, and then I can gently unfold it. Okay, but having to fold and unfold it twice, it's just kind of a nightmare to me, at least, I don't know, I can't quite figure it out. At this point, I want to make sure that I'm pressing my two layers together of my pie, and I just kind of can go around the brim and press that down to sort of seal it. And this will be one of two times that I'm sealing it. I'm going to cut off the extra. Sometimes I don't cut off the extra. You don't always have to. Sometimes I'll just fold it over. And I just find that if I don't cut it, or I guess when I do cut it, it just makes it a more consistent measurement when I'm folding it and pinching it to prep it the rest of the way. So cutting off the extra, just about there, and I just use a butter knife, it's not cutting me. All right, and from here, now I'm going to lift it up. I'm gonna make sure that both of those layers, the bottom layer and the top layer, are together, and I'm actually gonna fold it over in half and get it off of the rim. Okay, just like this, fold over, and I just kind of press it all together to make sure that it's good and sealed. And it's at this point, it's not terribly pretty. I'm just making sure that that edge is even. Okay. So it's kind of rough. You can get a closer look at that, but I'm not done yet. So I have a pretty even edge. Everything is off, is not hanging over anymore. And from this point, I'm going to lift it up off the brim, and I'm going to put 2 of my fingers like this and just press my other finger into the groove, and I'm going to go along, and I'm going to put my thumb into the groove that was just made by my forefinger. I don't have any special tools for this. I just use my fingers and it works just fine. But again, it gets it off of that rim and just kind of makes a pretty scalloped edge. And I go all the way around my pie, lifting it up off the rim and crimping it like so. And because I've already trimmed it and folded it over, when it comes up, it's going to be the same height for the most part. Now, the other thing that this does is that the contents of the pie will expand. And so raising it high up off the brim is going to kind of create a barrier so that it doesn't spill over, like leak out and spill over into my pan. So see, now it's all nice and pinched together and scalloped, and it almost looks like I know what I'm doing, right? At this point, you do need to cut air vents. My sister is really super crafty, and every pie that she makes, she is a piece of art. Like, she cuts something fancy like a turkey or a Christmas wreath or a tree or a message. She's really good at that. And today I'm just going to be really basic and just cut a few vents. I don't want to cut all the way through. I mean, I want to cut through the pastry, but I don't want to make a line that goes all the way across the pie. So I'm just going to cut a couple of slits, and I usually just kind of do a little bit of a starburst. And I think it's pretty, and I think it works, and it allows the filling to expand without anything exploding. Super basic. Okay, there you go, pie crust. Now I'm going to make sure that I get foil around the edges. It's important that you do this because everything on the edge cooks faster than what's in the middle. So you want to take some strips of tin foil and cover the crust so that it doesn't burn, okay? So how I do this, if you can see it, I actually will put it under the lip first and just fold it, mold it to the shape of the pan, and then I just gently fold it over the crimped part. Okay, and I pinch it down, but I really make sure that it has that, and I used this on my apple pies that I made last night. So when I connect the next one, I pinch it to connect it to the foil next to it. And then again, I form it, mold it to the bottom of the pan, and gently fold it over. And as you fold it over, you can make little creases in the foil that will just kind of help keep it anchored and keep it from slipping and sliding. Okay, usually takes 3 pieces of foil to get around your pie tin. And on that last one, I make sure that it connects to both sides, to both of the foils that were already made. All right, and we're gonna fold it over so that my crust is covered and won't cook too fast. So you cook it for about 40 minutes with the crust covered, and then when that timer goes off, you'll take off the foil and let it cook for another 20 minutes, and then you've got a perfectly wonderful pie. So that's basically what I do. I could not really, I would quit making pie altogether if it weren't for this pastry mat that allows me to just kind of very easily fold up my crust. So hopefully those 2 methods helped, flipping the pie tin over for the bottom one and then folding it in half using the pastry mat for the top one. It makes it so much easier, and I hope you find that helpful. So have a happy Thanksgiving, happy Christmas, happy holidays, happy pie making.